If you really want to gain velocity in getting people to back you in whatever you want to do, you have to engage them in the process. What we always want to strive for is to exceed others' expectations and not to disappoint people. But what we're also striving for is how to maintain our velocity and how to make sure we're working on the right tasks that move us forward. So the secret to gaining velocity and influence is to engage your audience. Many of us today are feeling out of sorts. We are in a period of flux and not sure of our future. Today is only a point in time in our lives. How we handle this difficult period will impact our overall performance in life. Are you letting this tough moment negatively impact you, or are you using it to create breakthrough thinking on what you want and need to do to win the marathon of life? Now, you're taking some quantified risks which will help you gain velocity. And welcome to this week's Velocity Mindset Success Stories. My name is Ron Karr, and I'm author of the Velocity Mindset book, and I'm here with a special guest. It's an individual that I wanted to come into the show for a long time because what he has to say will be gold, so you want to get your pen and paper ready. His name is Scott McKain, and his recent book is called Iconic: How Organizations and Leaders Attain, Sustain, and Regain the Ultimate Level of Distinction. It was recently named on Forbes.com as a top 10 business book for 2018. The first edition of his book, Create Distinction, What to Do When Great Isn't Good Enough to Grow Your Business, was named by 30 major newspapers such as the Miami Herald as one of the top 10 business books of the year. He's been quoted in many media, print, TV, USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the list goes on and on. He was also on many networks, including Fox. Arnold Schwarzenegger booked him for a presentation at the White House with the president in the audience. But now, get this one. Scott played the villain in a movie named by esteemed critic Roger Ebert as one of the 50 greatest movies in the history of cinema, directed by the legendary Werner Herzog. His client list is like a who's who in business, including Merrill Lynch, Apple, SAP, BMW, the list goes on and on. He's been honored with distinction, along with Zig Ziglar, Seth Godin, Dale Carnegie, and just 20 more in the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame. And after thousands of presentations in 50 states and 23 countries, he's been honored with membership in the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame. Scott, welcome to the show.
Ron, as always, it is great to be with you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Now, I got to share with the audience one thing. The reason why I love talking to you, besides all of your insight and the fact that we're friends, is because of that voice of yours. And you were a former anchor, right, on TV.
Yeah, I got my first job in radio on my 14th birthday at a little station in Southern Indiana where I grew up. Then I was able to parlay that into some work in television, and was a television news anchor and entertainment commentator in Indianapolis for the CBS affiliate for a while, and had some great experiences in broadcasting. But this speaking and coaching and consulting, this work has always been my goal.
Well, I love that voice, and hopefully the audience will do too. I know they will. Let's get into the hardcore facts to help the audience succeed. Your books discuss the four cornerstones of distinction. Can you share with us what those four cornerstones are?
You bet, Ron. One of the things that happened to me is I went through a personal challenge where I had to put my speaking business on hold for a while and had to jump back into the mix of things. And I had to figure out how to stand out. And I wish I could say that I was wise enough that I was looking for a speech topic or looking for something that would, form the basis of my next speech. Really, I was just trying to help my business survive. And I started studying what did it take to help organizations stand out and be attractive to customers, attractive to prospective employees, and all of that. And I discovered there were four basic cornerstones. And the first one is clarity. You got to be crystal clear about what your advantages are in the marketplace. And this is an extraordinary challenge for sales professionals, for entrepreneurs, and really for any business, because it means you've got to be very exact about what you are and where your flag is in the ground, which means you also have to be just as precise about what you're not. And that's what we have a harder time doing. So clarity is the first one.
But that also takes a degree of strength and confidence, because that means turning away business that doesn't suit you if it's not in your ideal lane based on the clarity you have of who you are and who you want to be with.
You're exactly right. And, as beginning entrepreneurs or beginning sales professionals, I remember when I first started my first sales job, man, if you had a check that would clear and could fog a mirror, you were a prospect, and then you realize when you look at those who have been more successful, they are the ones who are able to say, this is what I do. And that means they're also able to say, no, we don't do that, but let me refer you to someone who can.
Now,
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and as you know so well, Ron, I mean, when you're able to refer someone else and to say that is something you don't do, a couple of great things happen. Number one is your credibility shoots through the roof, right? Because when you're willing to say that I don't do this, but let me refer to you someone that's qualified, your credibility goes up, which simultaneously means that when that prospect needs what it is that you do, you have the front of mind share with them that's going to move them to buy from you. Because if you'll be willing to say what you don't do, it also means you have great confidence in what it is that you do.
Right. Now, the other side of that is if you take jobs just for the almighty buck and it's not the right fit for you, it's really going to slow you down, because you'll be spending more time on that than if you were dealing with a company or a situation that was the right fit, and it will just rob you of your velocity. Fair statement?
Exactly. I was just getting ready to say, Ron, I mean, that's where your approach to velocity is so in sync with this, because, as you say, it is the combination of both speed and direction. And it doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction, right? I mean, it's not going to get you where you want to go. I mean, if I'm sitting here in Las Vegas, where our offices and home is, if I want to go to Los Angeles, I can go 300 miles an hour east, and it's not going to help me get to Los Angeles. I've got to figure out not just speed, but also direction. And I think that's one of the challenges that so many organizations have, is they're not precise. I would say they lack that clarity, because if you haven't really decided on the direction, then how are you going to get there?
Then everything else just falls into place. So exactly. For the audience, we're talking about how to create distinction, of which there was 4 pillars. And Scott started with the number 1 of clarity. And distinction, for all you sales-minded people, you want to talk about how do you differentiate? That's what we're talking about. So Scott, what's number 2?
Second is creativity. It's finding something unique, something that you're known for. Ron, the example that I often use is the Taylor family in St. Louis starting a little rental car business. They got to compete against Hertz and Avis. And how do you differentiate in that business? I mean, the Ford I get from Hertz is the same as the Ford I get from Avis. There's no way I can vary or differentiate my product. So what they did was to decide to be creative at one single point. How does the customer access the product? And the Taylor family named that little business Enterprise Rental Car. And we know that at Enterprise, they pick you up. So it wasn't that the product was so unique or different. It's still the same Ford, but it was the fact that they were willing to bring the car to you rather than make you come to the counter and get the car that made Enterprise now. It's one of the key components. It's made Enterprise now the biggest in the industry. So, but we can talk about small businesses too. I wrote in Iconic about one of my favorite steakhouses, St. Elmo's in Indianapolis, and they have the most outrageous shrimp cocktail sauce you can imagine. Now, you don't think seafood and shrimp cocktail in Indianapolis go together, but it's kind of interesting. They have higher gross revenue than Tavern on the Green in New York City.
Well, if it's a steakhouse, we have to go there. But
Yeah, absolutely. It is my favorite steakhouse in America. But here's, not only did they get creative though and have something to talk about, our friend Jay Bear calls those talk triggers, something that, that moves your customer to talk about you. But the other thing is they got creative with internally as well. So every waiter has a business card that they present to you at every meal, hoping that you will call not only to make a reservation at St. Elmo's, but to ask for their table. So they view each server as an entrepreneur, as they call it. You're an entrepreneur inside our restaurant. And waiters it stimulates incredible repeat business, not just for the restaurant, but for the waiters. And now the waiters there, through this creative approach, look at being a server at St. Elmo's as a career, not just as a part-time stopgap job to get them through college or on to the next thing.
And they're more motivated to serve the clients.
Exactly.
With a great experience.
Exactly right.
That's a great story. What's number 3?
Third is communication. It's something that maybe you and I kind of take for granted because we do so much of it. We make our living doing it. But one of the things I think is kind of interesting is that the tools have certainly changed over a period of time. Our pal Jason Dorsey was telling the story about he was on the road and he called his young daughter on FaceTime, right, on his iPhone, and he sees her and they talk and all that. But interestingly enough, he come to the realization that for her whole frame of reference is that you look at the person you're talking to on the phone. His is the phone was attached to the wall, right? And you had a cord and you had to stay close enough to the cord. And then we got a cordless phone in our house. I mean, even before the cell phones that we're so familiar with. And so the frame of references are different for different generations. Yet regardless of how old we are, we all love a great story. And so what professionals have to be able to do, whether it's entrepreneurs or sales professionals or C-suite executives, we have to learn how to tell better stories, how to connect through narrative in a way that is memorable and compelling.
And just to add something to that, the reason why I say stories are so important, we all create stories, by the way. Anytime someone says something to us, we create a story of what we think it means. But stories are fueled with emotion.
Yes.
And so emotion moves people to action. And that's why it's important that we create stories. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, Ron, you'll remember my first book 7 years ago was titled All Business is Show Business. And a lot of people misunderstood that because their perception of show business was, song and dance. One person wrote me that they didn't like the concept. Is my cardiologist going to tap dance her way into my bypass? Well, that really missed the point. Show business succeeds when it creates a powerful emotional connection with the audience. Now, sometimes it's through laughter. We go see a Will Ferrell or a Kevin Hart movie and we laugh, but it also is creating emotion. I mean, Schindler's List was a product of show business.
Yeah.
Sometimes the result is to scare us or to make us cry or to make us angry or to make us think or to make us laugh. But nonetheless, if my goal as a filmmaker, for example, is to create a feeling of anger with the audience about something that's wrong and should be corrected, if the audience is angry, then I've done my job, right? I mean, I've created an emotion and what I'm doing has transmitted that emotion to the audience.
Right.
That to me is what storytelling is. It is thinking about what is the emotion that we want to create with our customers or perhaps with our employees and connect with them, because there is no connection without emotion. I tell this to groups all the time. That's why this is so important, is because customer loyalty is driven out of emotion.
Right.
There's no reason for me to be loyal to anything I don't care about. You got to get me to care about it before I'll be before as a customer or as an employee that I'm going to be loyal to what you're talking about. So you hit the nail on the head, Ron. It is absolutely essential that we use communication and narrative and story as a way to drive emotion with our audiences.
I have to give you a true confession, Scott. When I joined NSA, National Speakers Association, 31 years ago, and I heard people say, you have to be a performer, it's show business.
Yeah.
I'm going, get out of here. Because I was a hardcore business guy, and I was only interested in results. And I'm going,
Sure.
you know what? They just want the results, give it to them. But as I matured as a speaker, I came along for the ride because, yes, you need to be able to perform. I would have to say, if I knew that day one, I probably would have hit my success earlier and gained velocity. But that's what life's all about. That's
Sure.
what
Sure.
organizations like the National Speakers Association are about, to help
Absolutely.
you on your journey, gain that insight to help you get to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the next one?
Well, the final one is a customer experience focus. And it really builds on what we've been talking about what is the experience. And the experience is driven by, experiences are driven by two things: personalization and emotion. In other words, I'm not just selling life insurance policies. I'm helping your family plan for retirement and plan for the future, right? I mean, it's not about all families. It's not about the policy. It's about your retirement. It's about what's going to happen to your family in the future, your family. So let's talk about, then that lets me talk about very personal things. When you get personal, then people get emotional. I mean, it's so funny. I do a lot of work in the automotive industry now. And one of the things that I keep telling them, because they think they're selling cars. And I said to them, it's kind of interesting. I mean, if I see a coffee cup that looks like this, I go, oh, look, there's another coffee cup that looks like the one I've got, right? If I see somebody going down the road with a car that's the same color and same make as mine, I say, hey, who's that dude driving my car? Right? I mean, I have such an identification with the product. It becomes, I love cars, so for me, I'm kind of a car guy. And it's like, I have such an identification with my car. If there's another one like it on the road, I think, who is that guy driving my car? When we can personalize, and the more that we personalize that, so now in the service department, they say, hey, we're going to take good care of your baby today. It's not that we're going to change the oil on that engine. It's, we're going to take good care of your baby today. You got it. Don't worry about it. And they clean it and vacuum it. And they do all those things. Now you've created an experience. And that experience does two things. It gets me to repeat my business. Hey, why would I take a chance going someplace else? Those people take care of my baby, my car. Second thing is, I'm telling you, it gets referral business. So that, to me, that's the lifeblood of business success, is repeat and referral business. It's complicated and difficult to attain, but the basic premise of it is very, very easy for anyone to understand. It's just we get so busy doing what we do, we don't think about what we do. And by the way, let me add real quick. When I say the customer experience focus, I also mean on your internal customer, your employee, not just your external customer, the one that you're trying to get to invest in your products and services.
Sure. So Scott's talking about how to create distinction for yourself, for your company, for your products and services. And the four elements he talked about was clarity, creativity, the ability to communicate with stories, and of course, the customer experience focus, which he just talked about. Scott, you've been going around the world sharing this concept with a lot of companies of all sizes. Can you share a couple of results, what people can expect when they bring this model to their businesses?
Sure. There's a couple just came to mind. One is in Scottsdale, Arizona. There is a resort property there. And they had the idea, what does distinction look like for a resort? It's the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess. What is it? What if we created distinction? And they really put the meat on the bones with it. We helped them with this. And so what is distinctive housekeeping? Okay, let's get clear about what that would look like. What's something creative that we could do? We could leave something in the room, or we could fold the towels to look like a phoenix because they're based in Phoenix, or we could, and there's several unique and distinctive things that they do as housekeepers in the room. Communication. So part of that becomes internal. When a guest has a compliment, they tell the story. They don't just say, you got a 4.9 out of 5 on the evaluation scale. they tell those stories because they reinforce each other within housekeeping. And then they do the customer experience focus. If everything went exactly right, what would that be? And they've defined that, and they've really analyzed what, and they did it at the front desk, and they did it with valet parking, and they did it with every particular component of that. Now that resort, after going through this, has been named by Travel and Leisure magazine as the best resort in America. The CEO of that hotel was named the Hotel Executive of the Year for the world. It is now the most profitable of all the Fairmont properties. It has the lowest turnover of any hotel in America. These are the kinds of things that can happen when you go through this process, and you can create those kinds of results.
So that's a great story, Scott, and that's what people get from working from you. So if you guys want to create distinction, please feel free to contact Scott, and we'll put up a URL for you in a couple of minutes. But now let's get to the reality of today. There's a shortage. Yep. There's a labor shortage. There is a supply shortage. People don't have the time or the resources to do all that. That's their excuse. That's their story. What's your answer to that?
Well, we're a family show, so I'll edit my typical comment here. First off, I said something to an entrepreneur the other day. It's a client, and it upset him. But then he came back and he went, "I'd never thought of it that way." He said, "People don't want to work anymore." And I said, "No, they just don't want to work for you." And he was like, "Well, there's a shortage of people out there." I said, "I was in the Apple store the other day, and they got no trouble."
You're right. You're absolutely right, because I say this to clients all the time, and I think what's happening is, I'm not getting political here because it's not a political show,
sure. Yeah.
But I think the pandemic is the great equalizer. The Democrats always wanted to raise the minimum wage. They don't have to worry about that anymore because the pandemic is doing it, because now people are being forced to pay more just to get people. But as you say, it's not just paying them. It's the culture and the environment of them feeling valued.
I have to admit that, and I tend to be a little politically conservative. I assumed that a component of this was the payment of unemployment benefits. People could stay home and make as much money. But if we look at the facts, if we really look at the data, taking politics out of it, more people have been quitting after the benefits run out. So we can't sit here and say people are just sitting home collecting them, because after the benefits ran out, more people quit than they did before. So the evidence doesn't support that conclusion. So what we have to do is to create the kind of place that people want to work. Look, at the end of the day, my first job, if I walked down the hallway and the boss grunted at me and kept walking, all of a sudden I thought, man, I'm still employed. That's great. And when I've had younger employees say, "But Scott, you don't understand." And I want to say, well, in my day, I worked for, $2 an hour and the boss didn't talk to me. And then I realized they're right. I don't understand. Yeah. But what I have to do is also get the fact that I got to deal with the world the way it is, not the way it was, not the way I might want it to be, not what my ideal. At the end of the day, that's what the world is today. They expect it. They expect an experience.
That's a powerful statement. We have to deal with what the world is today. We got to take away our emotion. Why is it different and all that? It is what it is. How are you going to address it? You couldn't have said that more powerfully, Scott.
I appreciate that.
Scott, you say something that I got to bring in. We got about 6 minutes left. I can't think of anything better than to maybe end the show with this last conversation. You say that everybody says you got to be positive, but you're saying, no, you got to bring negativity to the game. You want to explain that one?
Yeah. Well, it was for my research for Iconic. And Ron, I hope, you and I know each other pretty well, and I try to be a positive person. And I had a prejudice about that I really had to confront to write that part of the book, because what I realized by researching it is I read this study. Let me back up. I read this study out of Texas A&M University, and it said, in essence, that SWOT analysis, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis, in many organizations are absolutely worthless. Well, that stunned me because I always thought, man, that's a great tool, right? And the reason they said through the research it was worthless is that employees are afraid to tell their managers about weaknesses and threats out of the fear of being perceived as a negative employee. Yet when I looked at iconic organizations, see what happens if in most companies, if a customer has a problem, the business will do what it takes to make that customer happy. I'm not saying that's bad. That's a good thing, right? Let's make that customer happy. Here's what they don't do. They don't drill deeply enough into the negative to figure out what broke down in the process that made the customer unhappy in the first place. So they keep creating unhappy customers because they're not willing to be negative enough to say, here's where we're wrong. Here's where the process is wrong. Here's where, and here's this thing. And Ron, you brought it up. Because of COVID, because of all these changes that we've seen, it might be a process that was perfect 2 years ago, and it's wrong today.
And what you're talking about is so critical, but it really has to start with the top. Mm-hmm. The top welcoming negative comments. Now, how you say that is a different story. Yeah. You want to say it as a good criticism, right. Not as a blaming anybody, but you're saying, look, here's the challenge and here's the issues, and we need to fix them. When I first started speaking and I had to develop a training program, mm-hmm. I thought, let me take the American Association of Training and go in and learn how to do it. And I'm sitting in this program for 2 days. It was a good program, mm-hmm. but I realized I knew how to do it. But the last conversation, the facilitator asked us one question, and there were mostly HR people in the room. And he said, if the CEO comes to you and says, here's the problem, go train on it, and it's not the problem, what do you do? And they all said to a person, do it or you'll get fired.
Oh, wow.
And I said, are you nuts? If you do it and it's not going to work, you're going to get fired anyway. But they're afraid to do that. And I think that that's really a function of senior management creating that culture. Isn't this a message for senior management?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. We need to get senior management to be positive about negativity. Right? I mean, again, it's not negative. It's not negative in that. Don't get me wrong. One of the things I say in the book is that non-specific negativity is bad. By that I mean, hey, this place sucks, right? I mean, we all, this is a horrible place to work. You've got to be very specific about what is wrong. It is that this precise aspect, but, and we need to be very positive about that. And Ron, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, think about what you just said for a second. I think that's very profound, because think about if that was the case in a medical situation, right? If the doctor knows it's wrong, the other opinion is wrong, but doesn't say anything to you because, God forbid you disagree. Seriously, we get second opinions hoping that there might be some disagreement or to get us to a better answer. We want that kind of conflict. We want that discussion going on. Yet too many managers think that, hey, my way or the highway. Hey, in today's generation too, and again, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying it's the way the world is. That's just not going to be acceptable. That is not an acceptable form of management for today's workforce.
And that's when they're mostly self-focused, those managers, worrying about how they look, worrying about their own, but they don't realize that they're shortchanging even their own success because somebody else who works for them may have a better idea and can create better success, but their stubbornness and their fears is what stops them.
Quick story to wrap us up, Ron. At a very young age, I was a national officer of a student organization, and one of the contributors to that student organization was General Motors. And so through a very fortunate timing, I had the privilege of having lunch with the then chairman of General Motors. And it was just, I couldn't imagine, I'm 22 years old, sitting in a room, having lunch by myself with the chairman of General Motors. And I asked him a question, because at that time, GM was one of the largest employers in the United States. And I said, the day you were hired at GM, they probably hired another 1,000 people. You know, how does one with a workforce of hundreds of thousands, why you? What made you the chairman of General Motors? He said, you know, what's funny is, he said, nobody's ever really asked me that. And he said, when I first started as a very, very, very junior manager, an idea that I had was if I tried to control everything, I couldn't get promoted, right? Because there was nobody ready to take my place. So he said, everything I did as a manager was to try to make my people better than me, because if there was somebody that could easily take my job, they could move me someplace else. Well, he said, by the time I had built a career of that for 20 years, it got down to 2 people that they were considering to be the chairman. He said, I had, and I love this phrase, he said, I had this reservoir of goodwill that I had built from all of these people that had managerial jobs because I had helped them, that now they just pushed me into being the chairman. And he said, it's one of the messages I've tried to get across here. We can't promote you unless you're helping build up people. And Ron, I think that's one of the things that you're so terrific at. And one of the things where your velocity message is so critical is that, you know, I think of what he said to me, and he not only had speed, you know, everybody wants to advance, but he had direction. I'm going to help other people advance so that I can advance. And you put those two together as you do, and powerful, powerful things happen. So thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you. That is such a powerful concept. If you're in management or a leader, the trick to being successful is concentrate on making your people successful. Yeah. You do that, your success will be automatic. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time already, if you can believe it. Time goes flying by when you're having fun. The great Scott McKain. If you really want to know more about the concept of distinction, and I really think you should, then go buy his book, The Iconic. And I just lost the rest of the title, but it's called Iconic. And it's, I'm sorry, Scott.
No, that's all right.
It's how organizations and leaders attain, sustain, and regain ultimate level of distinction. You get a hold of Scott McKain, simply go to the URL that we had up on the screen a couple minutes ago, which is Scott, https://scottmccain.com, and he will respond to you. That's been today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with another guest. So be good to yourself and to others. We're all in this world together. Let's make it happen, because when we work together, we do gain velocity at that moment. Have a great day.